Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Martin Andrews. I'm the creative director at Inquire Ed, and I'm so glad that you can come here today and join us for our webinar, Acquire, Connect, Transfer, a Framework for Deeper Knowledge Building. It's presented by the National Council for the Social Studies and Inquire Ed. The National Council for the Social Studies, it's the largest professional association in the country dedicated solely to social studies education. And each year they gather for their annual conference. This year it'll be in Washington, D.C., December 5th through the 7th. Now you might say, oh, that's so far away. I don't have to worry about that. But if you are interested in submitting a proposal for the session at the conference, then you should get on it because submissions are due February 28th. And you can find out more at socialstudies.org/conference/proposals. Check it out. We'll be there and we'd love to see you there. Submit a proposal. They are such a great organization. It's a great time to meet everyone and come together with colleagues. The series is also brought to you by Inquire Ed. Inquire Ed supports teachers with high quality instructional materials that make joyful, rigorous, and transferable learning possible for every student. I stress the transferable because we're going to be talking about transfer today. Our social studies curricula, Inquiry Journeys K-5, and middle school world history are used across the country to help students build deep content knowledge and develop the inquiry skills that are essential for a thriving democracy. Julie Stern is passionate about synthesizing the best of education research into practical tools that support educators in breaking free of the industrial model of schooling and moving toward teaching and learning that promotes sustainability, equity, and well-being. She is a four-time best-selling author of Learning That Transfers, Designing Curricula for a Changing World, Visible Learning for the Social Studies, The On Your Feet Guide to Learning, Transfer, and Tools for Teaching, Conceptual Understanding, and Elementary and Secondary. She is a James Madison Constitutional Fellow and taught social studies for many years in Washington, D.C. and Louisiana. Julie, thank you so much for joining us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin. Loving seeing in chat where people are from. We've got somebody from my hometown of New Orleans on, from all over the place. Beautiful. Thank you guys for being here. Somebody's from traffic on I-75. Be careful if you're driving. But so glad that you all could be here. Hopefully we're gonna learn a lot and also have a lot of fun in the meantime. So should I go for it or you want to ask me that first question?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to ask, well, first of all, can you tell us, I gave a little bit of bio about you. I mean, people are congratulating you for being in Brazil. So why don't you tell us why you're there and a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So my husband is a U.S. diplomat. So we're, very much American citizens, both of us, but we live abroad. So we bounce between D.C. and other countries. So that's what brings me here to Brazil. We've been in Sao Paulo for a year and a half. We've got a year and a half left. So that's what makes life interesting because I had my dream job. I was director of curriculum and instruction and also teaching one course, like the dream of keeping your foot still in the classroom in Washington, D.C., when he got called up to the Foreign Service. So it was his dream job. I already had my dream job, so we had to figure things out. So that's really what catapulted me into writing and doing professional learning for teachers. I already was loving what I was doing, but life happens, and so we moved to Sierra Leone in West Africa. So you see my artwork behind me there. That was our first post. Then Colombia in South America, and then Dominican Republic, and now Brazil. So I speak more or less a mixture of Spanish and Portuguese when when I'm out. But we love it. We love the lifestyle, and it's always an adventure.
Yeah, and Julie, before the webinar, we talked a little bit about, we can focus, and we rightly should in the social studies, on the content that we teach. What are we teaching? And we can also focus on the meaning that students make of that content. How are we supporting meaning making in a social studies classroom? How are we supporting building deeper knowledge? And you said that's the point of your work, like making meaning. Can you talk just a little bit about that, and then you can launch into to the slides you have?
Sure. I mean, for me, it's always just asking that question of how do we prepare kids for this ever-changing world? I've been screaming from the rooftops for over 20 years that the world is changing so much, we have to prepare our kids. And for, the first few years, people were like, do we believe her? Like it wasn't, but when I was training at the time in North America, I was in Canada on March 13th, 2020, when the National Hockey League canceled the rest of its season, like while I'm talking, that's when people started to say, okay, wait a second. It is an ever-changing world. There are unprecedented things that are happening. And now it almost feels like it just, even since COVID, it feels like daily unprecedented things keep happening with AI. So that's my first slide actually is really kind of looking at that. So I'm going to put up a slide that I want the audience to be able to share in chat, what comes to mind when you see this, because that's really what my work is all about. So here we go. Let me just go ahead and share this first slide with all of you. And I'm going to hit enter full screen. And I love to use chat. So for those of you who have already opened it up and told us where you're from, thank you for doing that. If you haven't opened it up, go ahead and open it up. And what do you notice about this chart? What comes to mind when you look at this? So I'll give you guys 30 seconds or so to just kind of process what's going on. And then if you want to share in chat, what comes to mind when you look at this? Wow, wow, wow. Good stuff coming in. Oh, yes, what you guys were saying. Yeah, and the reason I put this up is because I've had people come up to me before and say, Julie, you know what? Change is as old as time. Humans have always dealt with technological change. We in the social studies world that know that technology doesn't mean necessarily something that you plug into the wall, something electronic, but we do know that the wheel, fire, all of that is kind of technological innovation. And so someone came out to me and said that to me. And so why I love to use this one is it shows that scale. It shows that pace. You guys are saying the J curve. You're saying the sort of exponential or dramatic change as coming, then rapid change, rapid acceleration. So yeah, and someone's even pointed out in just one lifetime. So I imagine most people on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, if you were born before 1950, but I imagine most people on the call were born after 1950. And so if you look at that one, you look at how that sort of red triangle is this paradigm shifts. Basically, your way of life has shifted, and how rapidly way of life is shifting in our generation, in our children's, the kids that we teach in their generation. And so yeah, great things that you guys are putting into chat. But really that adaptability is huge. And what I love about this, Heather McGowan is a futurist. I like to follow these people who kind of keep, on the cutting edge of what's going on. I really like to follow her. But I loved, if anybody noticed, this URL down at the bottom here, future is learning. I love that, because that's the URL that they chose, because what they say, and they're not educators, they are, technologists more than anything, but they are saying we are going to have to keep learning. Today's kids are going to have to keep learning. And so I want to also go with something even more provocative than this, just to kind of kick us off. And so I like to put up pictures of my book here. Martin said he has them physically in the background, just in case you've seen any of my books. Sometimes the visual cover makes people say, oh yeah, I know that book. So here are my books here. But what I'm really asking myself in everything that I do is this question: how do we empower our children to navigate this complex world? How do we rely on research? I love to read cognitive science, even now emerging fields of neuroscience. I love to read studies of learning, studies of human development. And what I realized I was doing in all of these publications is exactly what I want to train teachers to train kids to do. And that is to become pattern seekers. I want us to look for, that's why the puzzle vibe is in a lot of my books, because I want kids to connect the dots. I want them to see different patterns through many different situations. And so that's what I think is most essential for you to take away from today's webinar. So this is a quote from Sam Weinberg, who's one of the history educators that I look to the most. When I read his book, Why Learn History When It's Already on Your Phone, this quote stopped me dead in my tracks. Knowledge possessed is not knowledge deployed. Wow. Just because you know it doesn't mean you're going to use it. I sort of had some guilt about exercise and eating healthy and all of the healthy habits that I probably know more about than I actually do in my life. So it was a little self-knowledge there, or self-criticism or critique there. But really, that is transfer. What he's talking about here is what is my most recent life's work, which is how do we get kids to deploy? How do we get them to transfer that knowledge? So if they know about World War II, if they know about any war, if they know about any particular historical situation or modern situation, how do we make sure they use that in today's society, in today's world, or in future situations? That's my life's work. And so I'm going to start off with this. And this is a little bit edgy, but I really think as social studies teachers, it's our job to prepare students for difficult, sticky, thorny topics. And so I tried to pick a relatively neutral headline here, and I'm not going to say anything about this particular situation, about my opinion about it. My question is, how do we prepare kids to be able to understand what's going on when the US president says he's going to take over Gaza and relocate its people? What does that mean? And so if we could just suspend our emotions about this, and it's hugely emotional, and analyze it just in an analytical stance, how would we do that? And how would we teach our students to do that? And so to me, the first step for educators, for social studies educators, is to look for the concepts, the transferable organizing ideas that are at the heart of this situation. And so here's just my quick brainstorm. Put in chat if you have some that I didn't come up with that you think are more important. But I thought sovereignty. That's like, to me, you know, the biggest one that jumps out at me. Of course, power, authority, historical context, enormous. I would call historical context a concept. That is an idea that we want kids to say, wait, wait, wait. What's the historical context? What's going on here? International law, of course, conflict, economic opportunity, rule of law. So those maybe are a little bit too similar, but international law and even rule of law, displacement, religion. I was like, wait, wait, I got to have religion in here. Religion is enormous. Solutions, and maybe even innovation. Jean says geopolitics. I like that as like a concept. Yeah, absolutely. Geopolitics is a huge, mine are a little bit more kind of sort of specific, but I also like that one. And my argument is just the following, that if school focused more on this stuff, instead of teaching about colonial America or about World War II or about the countries of Asia or about the countries of Africa or whatever it is that we call social studies, it's topics. But if we said, no, 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 we're going to still teach colonial America, the countries of Asia, whatever, but we are going to use those as vehicles for students to understand these conceptual, organizing, transferable ideas, then jumping back to what Sam Weinberg said here, they will be more easily able to deploy their knowledge if we focused more on these concepts, if these concepts were at the heart of what it is we do as social studies educators. Excellent. Land rights, location, great things coming into chat that you guys think I should add there. Those are all costs and benefits. Those are all still concepts. And if we focused our students' attention on those conceptual ideas and we used whatever the topics are to get students to understand those, then they'd be better able to transfer their learning and use their learning. So I want to posit this. Learning must be organized in the brain in order to provide any real value. So before we even talk about transferring to a big, heavy situation, sometimes teachers will say, especially history teachers, yeah, but Julie, I just need them to know all these details about X topic. And even with that, organizing learning in the brain is going to help them to retain the information even more. So before we talk about transfer, we just want the kids to remember. And we know the problem with kids forgetting what it is that we say. So I love to go to this quote from Jerome Bruner. I'll give you guys just a second to read what he says here. Love this quote. Love that he said it in 1959, so long ago. My parents were both pharmacists, and so I know what half-life means, basically like how long something lasts in the body. An unconnected set of facts has he has pity on this short half-life in memory. Organizing facts in terms of principles and ideas from which they may be inferred is the only known way of reducing the quick rates of loss of human memory. And so he was a cognitive scientist who was the chair of this major conference in the 1950s, which is where this kind of came out of. They gathered and they said, what do we know about teaching and learning so that we can pull out these sort of key ideas here. And so that's what my work is really all about, is helping students organize their learning. So if you think about all the things that kids encounter in school, all the kind of messy papers that maybe now it's more messy digital files, but it's almost like concepts are these organizing file folders in their minds. And so especially for history teachers, I'll tell them, just like maps, just like timelines and dates, concepts help us to organize our learning. So just as essential as it is for kids to mentally locate particular places for our geography teachers out there on a map, just as it is important for our history buffs out there for kids to sort of locate things in their mental timeline, it's equally important, maybe even more important, that they're able to file things away into these conceptual file folders. Yes, James, you got it, the Woods Hole Conference. So I made this, I woke up one day and if you came to my Visible Learning for Social Studies webinar, the book that I co-authored with John Hattie and Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, you've already seen this kind of visual, but I just woke up one night and I said, you know what, I got to make this visual. Think of all the little details that students encounter in their social studies experience. I just put a whole bunch on the screen, but the idea really is, if we could help them to have like a location file folder where they can file those away. There's a leadership and an authority file folder, and they can file those away. There's a governing documents file folder, they can file those away. There's conflict or war, and they can file those away in there. So that's kind of just a quick visual for us to see how it helps kids to organize it so they're better able to retrieve it. But then, as Bruner talked about with those principles, it's not just the concepts by themselves, but it is the connections, the relationships between and among those concepts. So where do location and conflict or war play out? Well, we just talked about one, and you guys really talked about that. The relationship between location and conflict is enormous, between location and governing documents, between location and leadership and authority, and so on and so forth. And so that's the basic idea here, is how do we help students to file those facts away, but also think about how those concepts interact? And can they come up with some bigger principles, such as the location has a major factor in whether or not a conflict or a war might play out, or whether or not there's authority, or whoever is the leader is also a major factor in whether or not there's going to be conflict or war. And so we want students to really pull out those big ideas. So I don't have time to go through even a fraction of all the research that I went through, but here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to read through these. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to read through each of these kind of one sentence summaries, some of my favorite pieces of research, and which one resonates most with you. Don't do it yet. What I want you to do is when the 2-minute timer goes down, if you like this first one, fortunately, even novel things, I want you to put A into chat. If you like this one up here, the top right, the reason experts remember more, I want you to put B into chat. This bottom left is going to be C, transfer always involves. And then this bottom right, breadth of training, D, I want you to put D. So 2 minutes to read this. And then when the 2-minute timer goes off, put into chat which one resonates most with you. Excellent, excellent. So loving what's coming in. Yeah, in the early responders, it was more B was winning, and then the later responders, more D was winning. That's just an interesting little phenomenon that was coming in there. All of them got some votes, but I would say probably it looks like B and D. I should do a poll so we can see more officially, but I like just really quickly as they're coming in to see what people are saying about this in the comments going on here. So I'm going to go through each one of them because only the first one uses the word concepts. But I just want you guys to see what I see, because even if you don't see the word concepts in a lot of research, it's still very much in my mind there. I love this first one where we got a few A's. I love it because of this word category that he uses, but also that he's using an analogy. He says concepts are a kind of mental glue. Oh, so good. They make learning sticky. The next one, B, was super, super popular. It's probably my most favorite, just one sentence piece of research that I've ever read, simply because it shows that we don't just memorize in isolation. We memorize organized sets of, inside of an organized structure, organized sets of ideas is what makes experts be able to remember as much as they remember. And I love it, especially with history teachers, because, when they'd say, Julia, I need to have so many facts to cover. And I say, look, if you teach this way, they're gonna remember. And we've seen it time and time again. C, They say abstracting. When we transfer to a new context, it always, they don't say sometimes, they don't say most of the time, they say always. It always involves reflective thought in abstracting. To me, that's getting more to the conceptual level. So we're looking at the details, but we're abstracting to the conceptual level so that we can seek connections with another. And then a lot of you are loving D because that one's super future oriented. So range is not a cognitive science. It's a best-selling New York Times book. But he's really talking about the idea of abstract models. So the more we kind of train students, breadth of training, the more we explore many different situations, the more students are building these abstract models in their brains, and that way they are better able to transfer. So that one really shows me the importance of not only studying World War II, but studying multiple conflicts, multiple big violent conflicts or multiple multi-nation conflicts, different things like that, so that you can really be able to figure out a new situation. So hopefully that was useful for you guys, just to see a little bit of research on which I build everything that I do. So this is the visible learning triangle. From originally done by Hattie Fisher and Fry, and then I wrote the social studies version of those books. And so surface level learning is when students gain initial understanding of concepts, terms, skills, facts, and vocabulary of a topic. But I would say the concepts are essential in surface level learning. If we're only studying the details and the facts, then it's rote and it's not even on this triangle. So that's really important. The concepts have to be involved here, but that's individual concepts by themselves. Deep learning, this is the shortest path to deeper learning, is when students make connections and between concepts and start to generalize about the broader principles based on their classroom experiences or their lived experiences. And then those connections are what facilitate transfer to new situations. So what I did was writing that book first, pulled that and said, what are kids doing in surface? What are they doing in deep? And what are they doing in transfer? And so this is the ACT model that this whole webinar is based on, of really surface level learning. You can see these little bubbles. Students are acquiring understanding of individual concepts aligned to facts. And I'm going to give you guys an example in a second. And then those connections, you can see how suddenly in step 2, they're connecting and building this web of knowledge. And then you can see very clearly in step 3 with that visual, it's those connections, that organized connections in the brain, that facilitate transfer to a new situation. So let me just give you this quick example. What do you notice about everything of group A? What in the world does group A have in common with each other? And how is it different than group B? This is hard. Every time I've done this with adults struggle more than the 7th graders that I designed this for. What do you notice about group A versus group B? Oh, that's a good one. Jillian coming in. One thing I noticed just really quickly as I was doing this is group B is all people, and group A has some people and some physical things. So I just noticed that. What else do you notice? Anybody else other than Jillian? What else do you notice? Maybe you're still reading. Okay, here they come. Here they come. Oh, good one. Entertainment versus essential workers, pop culture versus real people as role models, what is popular and what leads? Ooh, nice one. Social public influence versus small local influence. Interesting. Group A is very media oriented. Pop culture. I'm also seeing that group B are leaders. Group A has more value, external value. Okay, okay. Popular appeal, sort of glitzy, someone says. Oh, Amanda, you were on it. Excellent, excellent. You guys see what Amanda says? Group A are informal authority figures. B are formal authority figures. Group A are what people look up to. Group people are all in charge of decision making, leading. Excellent, Anya. Those are really great coming in. So I'm really just trying to show students the difference between power and authority. Those are really hard. Students often conflate those. So what I just did with you guys is a concept attainment. So power can come in many different forms, and authority is more official. So some of you were saying that they're more official. The marketing was a lot of the things you guys were catching on to with the ones that I had over on Group A. So that was just me thinking like a kid, and where the kid, and these kids were in the state of Georgia, and I asked the teachers, what are they really into? And they're like, those UGG boots or Nike shoes, or, so I just try to think about things. Those have power over the kids. But the other people do too. But they're more authority. So that's just a quick concept attainment of a way in which I want kids to organize in their brain. So I always try to start with something they're familiar with. I start with something really vague. So this is a basic concept attainment. Jerome Bruner is actually the father of the concept attainment, in case you're wondering where that came from. But now it's a pretty common methodology. And now I want kids to look for those concepts in new situations. So the next step is they need to find power or authority in their lives. Come to school the next day after looking for an example of power and an example of authority in their own lives. And so this is where we can really bring in student interest. We can really bring in experiential learning and inquiry to all of this. So I just want to share with you guys a couple of other examples, because I do a lot of lesson labs straight into classrooms. Where do you see trade? Where do you see location? Where do you see natural resources? So this is a little old, forgive me, of who these actual players are, but I just try to think about things that our students are interested in, that are current, that they understand, and they go right into this. So trade and location is pretty easy, but natural resources, I just threw it up there because that was another concept that we were looking at. And the students were like, well, their uniforms had to have come from something, maybe cotton, but probably there's some plastic going on in their uniforms. And one kid knew that like plastic is something that comes from a lot of different natural resources, but then we manufacture it, we chemically alter it to make these jerseys and things like that. And the kids noticed the plastic inside the uniforms for the padding, so many different things that they were finding natural resources more than I was. But that's just a quick example of pattern seeking. We want our kids to look for these concepts in new situations, but it's not just the individual concepts by themselves. It's got to be how they're connected. And so this is it's in all my publications, all 5 of them. I think if I write anything, these question stems will be in there. It's the thing that teachers tell me is the most useful of all the words that I've put out into the universe. And so I want to give you guys 2 minutes to play with these question stems. So first step is, what are you teaching right now? And what are the organizing ideas? What are the conceptual ideas? So trade, natural resources, sovereignty, power, authority. Those were all the things we already talked about. Those are very common social studies concepts. Location was another one that we talked about. Conflict, governing documents, rule of law is a concept. So I want to give you guys 2 minutes to just pick 2 or more concepts that you're currently teaching. And how would you plug it into one of these and pop it into chat? So I know that's a lot in 2 minutes, but I just want you guys to play with this for 2 minutes. So here we go. Wow, you guys. I mean, wow. I was like 2 minutes. I don't know what you'll come up with. Holy heck. Imagine if this was the curriculum. Just imagine, just read through what your fellow social studies teachers are putting from around the world. Imagine if this was the social studies curriculum and students were making their own meaning, as Martin pointed out in the beginning, for themselves of the answers to these questions. So the only thing I would say is those of you who are putting specific situations, conflicts in here, I'm seeing something about Greeks and Persians. I'm seeing something about Plessy versus Ferguson. I'm seeing several very specific things. Just end the sentence. So if I go back to this one here, what is the relationship between nationalism and militarism during the early 1900s in Europe? So I would just put the question mark after militarism to make it a transferable question. What's the relationship between nationalism and militarism? Question mark. And you are going to explore that question in early 1900s in Europe, and you're going to hopefully explore it in some other situation. So students are going to draw their conclusions in that one situation, and then they're going to look to another situation. So you guys just wrote this beautiful framing question for your unit that you've got a specific context to explore, but you're going to also explore a news story or something like that to continue to deepen. Back to that quote of breadth of training from David Epstein. Breadth of training predicts, how well students are able to transfer, or depth of transfer, I should say. So if we're looking at, oh, this is so good, Tayana, if I'm saying your name correctly, if I'm incorrectly, I'm sorry, any of you. How does power influence authority? Delicious, so good. How does, here, keep it on that same line. Scott says, how does authority impact freedom? Oh my gosh. These are so good, guys. And so just kind of coming to this one about the connection between Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education, we could call those, the conceptual idea there are landmark decisions, and and both landmark decisions, of course, they're about equality or inequality. And they're also about, I would also call those things of just kind of the story, the timeline of history and how the past influences the present, and so maybe even change. So I would say maybe what's the connection between historical landmark decisions and future landmark decisions, or something that's not really great, but something like that. And then Plessy and Brown become one situation where you're looking at, and then there's other situations, amazing, enormous amounts of other landmark decisions. So hopefully that helps to kind of give my quick feedback about all of these things here. Gosh, they're so beautiful. Yes, hopefully Martin says yes, the recording will be shared, and hopefully the chat will be shared too, because you guys did such a good job in 2 minutes that I want to collect some of those questions. And then we want to ask students really to build a web of conceptual connections. And so I love to turn my concepts into icons. I use the Noun Project. It's www.noun.project.com. That's what I use. There's also Flat Icon is another one, where I look for these little icons. And then students start to associate these visuals with the concepts. So they really start to make meaning of those concepts. And then I ask them to map it out, and it's grounded in evidence. So you can see here, this one that I was teaching about power, experiences, justice, and empathy. You can see we looked at Maya Angelou's poem. We looked at this guy in Brazil named Luis Gama. So you can see it says freed 1,000 people. We looked at Vinicius Jr. because Vinicius Jr., who's, just a super famous Brazilian soccer player. We looked at Lewis Hamilton, who's a Formula One driver. You can see the students are using these very specific examples in their mapping out of these concepts. And so I love to use dry erase boards, students mapping things out, students saying, for example, and this one you can see here, for example, in the fast fashion industries, because this was more of a middle school economics lesson that I was doing. And so this is just a quick way. I like the one on the right because you don't need any fancy icons. You can just have them use the write the actual concept out. But you can see here that what we're doing is building that organizing structure in the brain. And so I want to share this quote with you here from Joel Mehta and Sarah Fine from the Deeper Learning series. Cognitive scientists think of deep learning as the ability to organize discrete pieces of knowledge into, and you can see I bolded here, larger schema, kind of big structures of understanding. That's what cognitive scientists do. So I would once a week, guys, I would concept map every single week, or if you teach in cycles, maybe once a cycle. But that's what I would do so often with my students because it is a way for them to build that organizing structure. And you can see here, I just want to say this really quickly. You can see going back to, we looked at a quick poem from Maya Angelou. I think we looked at one of her super famous poems that she actually read out loud. It was a video. We looked at this very short video of Vinny Jr. talking about experiencing racism in Madrid. We looked at a very short video of Lewis Hamilton. I think I gave them bullet points of this guy, Luis Gama, here in Brazil. So it took 2 minutes to go to another context. So if you're studying the Greeks, the Persians, or Plessy versus Ferguson, or whatever these factored situations are, you can take 2 minutes to bring in another context, another situation, preferably even a modern one that the kids know about, so that they can sort of continue to build this schema in their mind. Because what we're trying to do, the ACT model is for kids. It's a great instructional strategy tool for us, but we want them to become pattern seekers. We want them to say, oh my gosh, I'm seeing that Vinny Jr. is experiencing racism. That's related. The unit was on apartheid in South Africa. That's what the unit was on. But I was coming in to show the teachers how you can weave in lots of other situations so that students could become pattern seekers. So they could see in their world, I'm in Brazil, so they were super interested in football and Formula One, or what the rest of the world calls football, soccer in the United States. And so I just try to bring in things that they understand. And this visual is from chapter 1 of my book. What we're trying to do is when they encounter a new situation, when they see, Trump saying he's going to take over Gaza, I don't want them to look at the specific details. Of course, I do want them to learn, where's Gaza, who's currently in charge of Gaza. Hopefully, they already know that before this moment. But I want them to look for these deeper structural patterns. I want them to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Who owns Gaza? Why is the U.S. president saying that he wants to take this thing? What's going on there? What's happening there? And what do other people think about it? I want them to look for those deeper structural patterns each time that they encounter a new situation. And so that's what we're training our kids to do. So here's a couple of more examples, and I believe that Martin has some examples as well. But really, this is an elementary teacher who was teaching supply and demand, and then she brought in the Lorax. So elementary teachers usually know how to weave in these transdisciplinary things really well. But such a great example, because I like that she actually made those glasses like I have in my stuff. Like she put supply. I want you to find supply in the Lorax. I want you to find demand in the Lorax. And so that's really what this is all about. Another elementary school teacher, they were studying the colonies. They were studying U.S. colonial history. That's what they were studying. But the students, this was, I think, grade 5, they came up with, we think we see these same concepts with what's going on with the U.S. women's soccer team. And they wrote this whole article connecting this whole paragraph you see here about, because the concepts were freedom, rights, equality, things like that. And the students saw those same things in what was going on at the time. So that's just a quick example. Sometimes I just like to put up a magazine cover. The Economist magazine covers are always super, super, super visual. And I just say, what concepts that we've been studying are present here? And how can we refine our understanding when we look at this new situation? So sometimes it can be that quick, especially for secondary teachers. Here's the cover of a news magazine. Where do we see the concepts in this situation? So I want to close with this quote from Adam Grant. If you're familiar with him, here's some of his books. But he shared this on social media, and I just absolutely love this, because we started off talking about preparing kids for the future. I want to end with this quote of preparing kids for the future. So give you guys a few seconds to read this. I think this is so important for social studies teachers. It's not enough to collect facts. The future belongs to those who connect dots. And that's what the ACT model is all about: acquire, connect, transfer. So really, really, really important that we intentionally teach and train our young people how to do that. So I'm going to skip through this. I just want to share this one last thing with you guys, and I'll make sure that Martin emails this all out to you guys. But I have a course for social studies teachers, and it's really an important time for social studies teachers to be around and working hard. So I'm giving away this free course. It's a $100 value, $99 US dollar value. So if you use the QR code or go to this, and I'll hopefully, Martin, you guys will email this out, you guys can have access to this course.
Absolutely. I'll email that out. I think we had a request for the slide deck. I think you can send that to me. I can put that in the blog post. And obviously, you know, if you use it, it's got to give credit to the source. Thank you so much, Julie, for joining us and for sharing with us. And you know, we've got a few minutes. How about we just go through one of the things that I loved a lot of things about your book, but what I loved even more specifically was that you really do a great balance between theoretical and practical. You really get down to, you know, so what could this look like in the classroom, and then like maybe what's a strategy or protocol that you could use during the, you know, acquiring of knowledge or the connecting or the transfer. And I pulled out a couple from the book, and one of the strategies you talk about there is a jigsaw. And this is actually an image from a classroom that we visited where students were doing a jigsaw in their expert groups. And I don't know if everyone is familiar with the jigsaw strategy and they use it in their classroom, but here's just the what of it and the how of it. I wonder if you can talk just a little bit, what makes it a powerful strategy for connecting those concepts or transferring learning. Tell us what's powerful about the jigsaw.
Jigsaw is so powerful. It's one of the most impactful teaching strategies that we can use, and it's one of the only ones that in Patty and Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry's work, they see that you can use it across surface to deep to transfer. And so you can do it for sort of surface level learning. What is you know, what do we mean when we say power? What do we mean when we say authority? So one group's got one concept, another group's got another concept, another group's got another concept, and they become experts. But what we started off this whole call about is what makes it so powerful is that the students are making meaning. Everybody's got a role. And if you don't fulfill your role, you're going to let your team down, because that's truly what the jigsaw is all about. That you become an expert, and then you got to go back to your original group, and you're the only one. Ideally, you're the only one who is visiting that other particular expert group. So it's up to you to come back and report on it. And so
Martha says, I found that jigsawing is really hard to do successfully. Do you have tricks to the problem of one person letting down the team? Is there some tips or tricks that you can give us for the jigsaw protocol?
I mean, to me, it's all the good stuff that is what, you know, MTSS would call tier 1 instruction, which is the use of visuals. So you saw my stuff there, the use of visuals, the use of connecting to their lives. So for instance, Martha, if you could say what you teach or what grade level, but I'll just give you a first grade example. when we were doing roles and responsibilities, we started off with things that they know. So like the basketball coach, super popular at the school. And we're like, what is the basketball coach's responsibilities? The bus driver was super popular at the school, like the actual human. We had a picture of the human, the person who was the bus driver, right? And so the kids like really starting with something that they're super, super familiar with. So Martha, I don't know if you are like, okay, first we're going to start with like, I don't know, fourth grade. I'm just making this up, but like fourth grade, ancient Egypt or something like that. If it's really far removed, that it's hard for the kids. So start with something really gradual, something that most of the kids really know and have exposure to. And that's going to help to make sure that they're all successful. So something that they really know, something pretty easy, use visuals. That's, and I would, you know who your kids are. I would go to the kids that I maybe am concerned about and really make sure they feel ready to go back.
Yeah. Another one you use in the book or talk about in the book is conversations. I don't know if people know about the conversations protocol. We used it a lot in our curriculum too. And here's the what of it and the how, just briefly. And I can share all this as well. This is examples from a third grade 20th century civil rights unit. Tell us a little bit about why conversations. What is the power of conversations?
Same as the jigsaw is that you've got roles, you've
Yeah.
got students actively learning, you got students actively processing their learning. And so kind of coming back, looking at the chat, Kristen is talking about the Fisher and Fry article. Yeah, for sure. That's both in both of my books as well. And so just what are the exact steps of the jigsaw? And I think was also in the Inquiry Ed
Yeah,
one.
we'll definitely share that. And we'll share all the books and everything as well. For this one, there's something about it too that um there's that you talked about like you have to introduce yourself into a novel situation. You have to practice transfer. And I love the idea that in both of in this one even more specifically, right? I'm at my station and then I move to another station and it's like a brand new situation, and then someone comes into that and I have to explain it to them. And so it's this constant sort of retouching of that, like, oh, I have to start over. I have to like apply what I know in this new context around the room. And I think it's a really powerful way to do that.
Yeah, and it's also exactly what you said is super bang for your buck if you were to do. So when I did that lesson where I had, Vinnie Jr. and Lewis Hamilton and a Maya Angelou poem, I was doing it very linear. But I could have done a lot more kind of bang for your buck if I would have done it as conversations, where each station had maybe the Maya Angelou poem, maybe the video clip from Lewis Hamilton. And so, as long as what we're doing there is training the kids, where do I see the concepts of justice? Where do I see the concepts of inequality? Where do I see the concepts of power? Where do I see the concepts of empathy in each situation is really great. So it's a way for exactly what you said for students to be like, wait, this is a totally new situation, but the concepts remain the same.
I love the the coaching and the help that's going on in the chat. It's really great to see. The last one that I had, and I know this is a big one, and I could even see the roots of this in some of the images you showed, is hexagonal mapping. And this is a fifth grade unit on the colonial era, where students are building a hexagonal map, and they create it throughout the course of the unit. And I think you really can you talk a little bit about hexagonal mapping and why it's so important?
Yeah, I mean, teachers really love this, and I think it's because of they create this kind of honeycomb vibe going on there, and so it's just another way to get students to build that structure in their mind. So concept mapping were the examples that I showed where students were drawing these lines with dry erase markers, and this is another way. So with all three of these strategies, what I'll say is be super super careful, and I love that you have this here with you say the concepts, be super careful that they don't become like a timeline, like put these hexagons in order of, specific events that happened, but that they are conceptual ideas. The same with the jigsaw and the same with the conversations is that there's got to be a conceptual kind of lens through which students are viewing each of these three strategies. So it's not just like a timeline or a sorting activity, but oftentimes I will see teachers using it that way, but really it's about how do power and authority interact. So those questions that everybody developed, that becomes your frame for all three of these activities. So you already did it in that quick little 2-minute brainstorm where you were thinking about what are the concepts that are the heart, and then use these amazing, powerful strategies to really bring those conceptual thinking to the fore whenever you're doing these activities.
Great. And so Julie, any last message you want for our teachers that are going to go back to the classroom tomorrow?
Yeah, actually, I want to share this quote with everybody that I skipped over. So I'm going to come back to this slide. This is from a student. This is from a high school student, but I love this. I have this little prompt in my book. Although I may forget much of what I learned this year, I will always remember that. Look at what this student said.
Oof.
Although I may forget much of what I learned this year, I will always remember that. And this student, it was a high school student, wrote this. That's what they'll remember. And so that's really what we're trying to do here is pull out those really big, enduring, lasting ideas. And we want the students to make meaning for themselves. That's going to be what is going to help us as humanity to better get along.
Great, Julie. And thank you so much. And everyone, look for an email from me on Tuesday. And thanks for coming. And Julie, thanks again.
For sure. Thanks, Martin. Thanks,
All right,
everybody, for being here, giving us your time.
take care.